The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Jonas Gahr Støre, Prime Minister of Norway. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Jonas Gahr Støre, Prime Minister of Norway. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This week has highlighted that we live in challenging times indeed. As a global community, we face dire consequences from war, climate change, the pandemic, food insecurity, and inequality. The Secretary General underlined this eloquently in his address on Tuesday. We have the values and principles necessary to deal with these challenges. They are enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. No country is unfaced by these challenges, and we can only successfully respond to them together. And this is precisely why we have the United Nations. The UN was born out of crisis to unite strength and enable nations to raise above narrow self-interest and find common ground. This is what we need to turn to again. The UN Charter sets out clear principles for a rule-based international order. But now this rule-based order is under attack. February 2022 ushered in what we hoped we would never witness again, a new large-scale war in Europe. Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine has led to massive suffering, large-scale humanitarian needs, and destruction of civilian infrastructure. Russia bears sole responsibility for the war and its consequences, and Russia is responsible for bringing it to an end. Mr. President, Russia's actions are in blatant breach of the UN Charter, and therefore something that concerns us all. The war is also having devastating global consequences, as we've heard so many speakers highlight this week. It has undermined multilateral cooperation when we need it the most. It has accelerated a negative economic spiral and jeopardized the 2030 agenda. We are all feeling the repercussions of the war. Energy supply is under pressure, inflation is soaring, and food insecurity has increased dramatically. Ordinary people across the globe, not least people in developing countries, are paying the price. And the war is amplifying other crises and compounding the impacts of climate change and armed conflict in other parts of the world. The Horn of Africa is faced with its worst drought in more than 4 decades. Pakistan is contending with devastating floods. More than 300 million people affected by conflicts and humanitarian crises are in need of humanitarian assistance and protection. In many armed conflicts, there is a lack of respect for international and humanitarian law, and civilians are paying the price. A few years ago, it appeared that hunger would soon be a scourge of the fast. Now, food insecurity is on the rise. And no continent is more vulnerable to the combined effects of climate change, conflicts, and growing food insecurity than Africa. Let me say this: Norway stands in solidarity with the people grappling with these interlocking crises. We have allocated more funding to humanitarian assistance and development cooperation in 2022 than ever before. Mr. President, the war of aggression against Ukraine is a challenge to the norms and the foundations of the United Nations. We are standing up to confront that challenge. Some hold the conviction that authoritarian regimes are strong, while democracies are frail and likely to crack under pressure. We are proving them wrong. Together with a strong alliance of partners, we are standing with Ukraine and aid its self-defense. As Europe's largest supplier of energy, we do what we can to enhance Europe's resilience. And Mr. President, we are standing up for human rights and fundamental freedoms elsewhere. Norway will continue to promote civic space, protect human rights defenders, and support media diversity and independent journalism worldwide. Women's and girls' participation in society and their right to decide over their own bodies are essential for democratic and sustainable development, not least in times of conflict and war. Safeguarding these human rights remains one of our top priorities. And while supporting Ukraine, we must not forget conflicts elsewhere. Norway has continued its peace diplomacy and peace-building efforts in major conflicts across the globe. As part of our long-standing engagement in the Middle East, we are pushing for an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, including a viable two-state solution. In Colombia, the new government has expressed its commitment to implementing the peace agreement with the FARC and initiating formal negotiations with the ELN guerrilla group. The ELN also seems inclined to renew that dialogue. And as a guarantor country, Norway remains committed to Colombia's quest for peace and to supporting the parties in this endeavor. In all the peace processes where Norway is engaged, we promote active involvement and participation by women in line with the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We talk to all parties as we work to achieve peaceful conflict resolution. And without dialogue, we have no opportunity to influence the parties and encourage them to move in a more positive direction. Norway also strongly supports the good offices of the Secretary General in conflicts worldwide. We commend him for his dedicated team for their important work on the Black Sea Grain Initiative and Turkey for its important contribution. The prices of food, fuel, and fertilizer were already high before the war in Ukraine, but the war has dramatically exacerbated this situation. So if the global community does not act swiftly, the current food crisis will develop into a food availability and a food supply crisis, and that is too serious. Together with fighting climate change, Norway has placed food security at the top of its development agenda. This year, we are allocating more than $300 million in funding for food security initiatives alone. We need to increase humanitarian assistance and enhance social safety nets, promote local food productions in the global south, and secure access to seeds, fertilizers, and technology for small-scale farmers, and accelerate transformation to climate-resilient and sustainable food system. In all of this, we must ensure that the needs of women and girls are adequately integrated. We are all dependent on a collective response if we are to succeed in addressing climate change and the loss of biodiversity. Currently, we are not on track, and this speed needs to change. Norway will honor its commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions and to play a key role in the green transition. We have listened to the concerns of developing countries, and we have decided to double our climate finance to these countries by 2026. Within this target, we aim at least to triple our funding for climate adaptation and resilience. Climate change affects millions of people worldwide and increases the needs of vulnerable people. The current humanitarian system will not be able to meet the increasing humanitarian needs. And as global warming continues, weather and climate extremes will increasingly have an impact on armed conflict. So, Mr. President, climate and security are already closely interlinked. The fight against climate change requires new, innovative approaches, and we must do what we can to make the upcoming COP27 in Egypt a success, and Norway will not rest one day before that summit. Innovative approaches, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, brings together private and public resources, trying to accelerate development. As co-chair, Norway will work with partners across the global south to support initiation of renewable energy transitions, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase clean power, and create green jobs. And then, Mr. President, with our geography and our history, the oceans can and will be a vital part of the solution to climate change, food insecurity, and poverty. If adequately managed and protected, the oceans hold the key to reaching many of the Sustainable Development Goals. But Sustainable Development Goal number 14 is the most underfunded, and that's why Norway is really pushing for making a change here. The high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy is co-chaired by Norway. It's an initiative by world leaders committed to ocean health and ocean wealth in support of the 2030 agenda. The panel members have committed to sustainably manage 100% of the ocean areas under their national jurisdiction. We will establish sustainable ocean plans and urge other coastal states to do the same. Mr. President, the 5th session of the UN's Environmental Assembly was an important breakthrough for multi-cooperation on environmental issues. Norway will work to ensure an effective agreement on combating plastic pollution through a life cycle approach. We must not overlook existing crises as new ones emerge, Mr. President. The pandemic is not over yet. We cannot go from COVID-19 panic to COVID-19 neglect. We must use the lessons learned from COVID-19 and the ACT Accelerator. This will be key to preventing, preparing, and responding to new outbreaks of infectious disease. Mr. President, Russia's unlawful act of aggression against Ukraine heightened geopolitical tensions and posed obstacles to multilateral cooperation. That is serious. As a Security Council member, Norway has consistently sought to strengthen the Council mandate to maintain international peace and security. And despite increased geopolitical tensions, the Security Council has retained its ability to adopt important resolutions. We secured a robust mandate for the UN in Afghanistan. Together with Niger, we negotiated a groundbreaking resolution on the protection of education in armed conflict. And we partnered with Ghana on the resolution of maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea. All this matters, Mr. President. And in times of crisis and rising global tensions, we all feel the pressure to put domestic concerns before global solidarity. In times of distress, it is only natural for political leaders to try to look after their own populations. It is their responsibility. But let us remind ourselves that there is no contradiction between this and engaging with the rest of the world. Quite the contrary, it is in the interest of our citizens. We are bound together, we are dependent on each other, and we have a shared destiny. And this is clear to me. Without a strong and effective UN, the international community will not be able to address the challenges we face. That is why we applaud and support the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda report. If anything, it is even more urgent to implement this report now than when it was launched. The summit of the future in September 2024 will be an important milestone. We expect and will work towards an ambitious declaration on future generations, and we look forward to engaging with the high-level advisory board and member states in the process ahead. Mr. President, let me thank you. We are living in challenging time, but let us never lose hope. We must face the present challenges with resolve and recall the strength we can muster when we act together. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of Norway for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.